Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. I'm the podfather, Jake Brown, alongside Rangers beat writer for the New York Post. That's right, Mollie Walker is here, and her colleague, our friend, is back. Larry Brooks will join us, our Hall of Famer, in just a few minutes. Not a Hall of Fame effort from the Rangers on Tuesday night, Mollie. A garbage effort. And that's the words of Coach Gallant, not me, although every fan in the building probably thought that. All the fans that paid $300 to get in, because that was the price day of for tickets. I don't know if it was the New Year, holidays, Ovechkin going for the record, although he got it on Friday, so people missed out on that opportunity, but it was expensive, and many are probably demanding a refund when they woke up Wednesday morning. A 4-0 shutout. The officiating sucked, but the Rangers might have sucked even worse, Mollie. They could not score, and it was ugly to the point that practice got Herb Brooks-esque from Coach Gallant on Wednesday. A lot to dissect here, so I'll just hand it off to you. And first, I'll say happy holidays and happy New Year.
Well, first of all, I'll say that $300 price tidbit was probably some of your best work, because it is quite unfortunate how expensive tickets were, and the Rangers come out and play like they did. Just an absolute dud. I think that it happens sometimes. There's definitely to something being off the ice for 4 days. But you got to argue that the Capitals had 3 days away from the ice. So, and I will say that the consensus in the locker room and from head coach Gerard Gallant was nobody wanted to hear the excuses that they could have leaned on, being away from the ice. The fact that the officiating was pretty abysmal, but nobody really wanted to turn to that because the Rangers were shut out for just the second time this season. But I think probably the crazier stats were how many shots they had and how many missed the net. I think it was like 22 of 27, something along those lines. But they for a team that's hit as many posts as they have this season, they weren't anywhere near the net. And I think it was just a poor effort all around, just kind of a dud, but it happens. I think the more notable thing is how Gerard Gallant responded to it in practice on Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. Yes.
We're recording this Wednesday. People will hear this Thursday,
Yeah.
but Wednesday things got pretty feisty at the facility.
That's why I wanted to make sure that we were clarifying. It was definitely a harder than usual practice. Gallant stopped 5-on-5 drills at one point and had them running gassers. Somebody sent me a GIF of, like he said, Herb Brooks with his again sequence, and it kind of had the same vibes of that as practice. But
has he done that before? Like, is that common for him?
Yeah. It's not out of the ordinary. He only does it when, it's warranted. The Rangers have had a couple really bad games underneath him, and he's responded as such occasionally. But I think the more notable thing is that the lineup was put back into a blender, most notably with Alexis Lafreniere getting dropped to the fourth line. So we will see if that actually happens in the game against against the Lightning. Excuse me, that's first, because it's one thing to obviously have him on the fourth line in practice, but it's something completely different entirely to actually play him that way in the game. But we'll get into all that with Larry Brooks shortly, and it is an extensive conversation because it is definitely warranted at this moment in time. But I think that my impressions of the lineup changes today at practice was that it was a little bit of an overreaction. I think that the team felt really good about themselves going into the break, and they were playing some of their better hockey than they have the entire season. And I think making a couple rash decisions just because of one dud game isn't really necessary. But it was, in all fairness to Gallant, it was a really bad game. So I kind of, see where he's coming from if he does choose to do that. But he says this all the time. He always says like, oh, they might change tomorrow. He said today, they might change by the time I get down the hall. But for some reason, I kind of believed him a little bit more this time. Maybe that's a shame on me situation, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we see different line combinations than we did at practice today. So I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Is it fair to call Lafreniere a bust right now, or
No,
is it too early?
we will get into that with Larry, but I'm gonna say no. It's definitely way too early to say that. And I don't think that's fair to say at all at this moment in time. But that doesn't mean that he, is completely sheltered from some criticism, because obviously he just hasn't been playing to that 2020 first overall pick selection. So we will dive into that with Larry shortly.
Yeah, this comes after, a Ranger win over the Islanders. And, hockey's not my number one sport, but it, kills me that that matchup is done for the season. Like that is just so stupid. I mean, the officiating is a thing that you could talk about every day, how bad it is. But for them to not play the team that they're fighting for the last playoff spot with, entering Wednesday just a point ahead of the Islanders, and they won't face them ever again. They won't probably face them in the postseason, barring a miracle, and they won't have another game in the regular season. The schedule makers should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. This thing should be spread out where they play one January, one February, one March, one April, once a month, not every 2 weeks, and it's over before the new year. It is just a pure shame that this rivalry and these two teams will not face each other, because now it's, a lot of scoreboard watching. These teams are tight, but Molly, that bugs me that they're not playing again.
That's the NHL for you. I think they just hate catering to their fans' wants and needs sometimes with the way that they do things and handle things. But honestly, at least that last game between the Rangers and Islanders, that was probably one of the better games between those two teams in recent seasons. I mean, you had Igor Shesterkin you had Igor Shesterkin in one net and Ilya Sorokin in the other, which it always seems that their starting schedules never match up, and it's always Shesterkin against Varlamov, or Varlamov against Georgiev, or whoever it has been in the past. So at least we got to see those two square off, and it was a high scoring game still, even with the ideal goalie matchup. But it was a great game, and I am also very sad that is the last one of the season, but I think it's still going to be so much fun watching the Devils, Islanders, and Rangers all gun for playoff spots in a very tight metropolitan division. It's really great for the sport. It's been a very long time since those three teams were competitive at the same time.
And that's what makes it even worse. Like the year that they're all good, it's like, oh, it's over. Let's just drop it. And, they were facing each other on other sides of the net. They were also giving each other milk and cookies on Christmas. How about Sorokin and Romanov and Igor having Christmas together? That's in the old days, like when we talk with Ken Danico, that would not happen. They'd be giving each other coal for Christmas. Now they're, sipping wine and having a grand Christmas together. I mean, I guess it's nice, but in the old days, guys would be pissed about that.
I definitely think, especially because of the travel situation that was going on with all the flight cancellations. I mean, I was talking to Ben Harper, and Ben Harper told me he was in a car for like 15 hours driving to Canada, sat at the border for like 6 hours, trying to get through the storm and this crazy holiday traffic. So I think that the players that weren't able to just go home, a lot of the international guys, the European guys, the Russian guys, they can't just pick up and go home, even if they have 4 days off. So the closest thing that they can do is hang out with each other. And it was really nice of Igor Shesterkin to open his home. And I know Artemi Panarin hosted Vitaly Kravtsov and his sister. So very, very nice. I think obviously it's a little different than the olden times, but you can't hate to see that. It's very nice.
I wonder what they brought to Igor's. They brought a nice Long Island deli sandwich, Jim's Deli. I don't know what they could have brought there, but
I know Sorokin has a sandwich named after him on Long Island, so he could have brought that.
At Seaport Deli? Do you know?
No, I think
where?
It's
Cherry Valley Deli?
Blue Line Deli.
Blue Line, yes.
Blue Line Deli. Yeah. They're
Islanders.
They're Islanders affiliated. I'm pretty sure they have the
colored
setup.
bagels.
Yeah, the colored bagels, and I'm pretty sure they have a setup in UBS.
Yes.
They do. Which is like so nice.
That's
that
what I
they
said.
did that.
The food there is good with the colored bagels, the chicken sandwiches, and I guess Ben Harper couldn't drop the "I'm Ben Harper" line at the border. I guess he wasn't good enough of a player. You did a nice story on his journey.
Thank you.
Just being off the scrap heap, the Rangers pick him up. and now he can't get past the border. All right. Well, hopefully he's good enough where one day he could skip the 6-hour wait. And I guess no one's booking Southwest Airlines anytime soon.
No.
I hope Larry didn't book Southwest on his trip to Florida to get back. He might be stuck in Florida, which with the weather there, that's not the worst thing in the world. Well, Larry Brooks is in Florida, in Tampa, in his hotel room, and he's going to join us next here on Up in the Blue Series. All righty, he's back in the saddle. It's our Hall of Famer, Larry Brooks, joining us. Follow him on Twitter at NYP_Brooksy. Larry, welcome back. Have you been able to keep up with Coach Gallant's lineup changes, or is you as confused as most Ranger fans right now?
No, actually, you know what? Compared to Elaine Vigneault, John Tortorella, this is kind of in the realm of sensibility. Tortorella would shake up lines in order to keep the team on edge a lot of the time. Vigneault did it because he was looking for combinations, much like Gallant. So I think every coach wants stable combinations. Everybody wants stability on their team, consistency in combinations. Generally, the Rangers have been able to start with 2-man combinations that for the last number of years included Kreider and Zibanejad and Panarin and Strome. And that was sort of that was the linchpin of their attack. Those two combinations, those 2-man combinations. We know that Panarin and Trocheck have not been a match this year the way Strome and Panarin were. And I think the Zibanejad Kreider, combination, kind of got a little bit stale. So when you have that, then you're going to need to continually make moves. Plus, there's the overhanging question of whether Hedel, Kakko, and Lafreniere are better together, or whether they should play on separate lines. And I don't think the coach has reached that answer. I don't think he's a huge fan of the kid line. I think he likes it. I think he likes to use it when he feels that putting them together injects energy into the team. But I don't think he looks at that line as a linchpin line. I just don't. I think he thinks that maybe Kakko belongs somewhere else. Maybe Hedel belongs somewhere else. So that needs to be resolved because, and I wrote about this over the summer. You can't make any decisions on the lineups until you decide whether the kid line's staying together or not. Mm-hmm. And they've been on and off this year, as basically every combination has. So, actually, Gallant has used fewer combinations this year than he did last year. The same number of games. So, again, he would prefer to stick with consistency. Every coach does. But the Rangers haven't played consistently enough to allow that.
Before we get into the Alexis Lafreniere discourse, I do want to make a comment, I guess, to your point when you mentioned the Kreider, Trocheck, Jimmy Vesey line. I think that Vincent Trocheck played the best hockey that he has since he arrived in New York when he was playing in between those two. And I agree. I think putting him back next to Panarin that's not where I would start when it comes to line changes after Tuesday night's dud. I that's like the one that I really don't understand, because I think Gallant liked it. It was pretty clear that the three of them liked it. Trocheck said that he liked it a lot. And I mean, Trocheck had like a few multi-point games in between those two. And the Rangers were just not getting nearly anything close to that when he first started in the season. I guess I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that line and if you think it could be a long-term answer for them.
Well, I agree. I guess the question is, does Gallant think that their greatest upside is if Panarin and Trocheck can click together? Does he want to run Trocheck out as the second line center? Does he feel he wants to give him those minutes that he would get on the second line that he's not quite getting with Kreider and Vesey? Listen, Trocheck, there's no argument that he's played his best hockey with Kreider on the left. It's a straight line, it's a straight line combination. VC goes up and down. Also, he can be creative, but he's very capable of just playing his side. I don't know. I mean, if you're not going to play the kid line together, then the other move is to play Panarin with Hedl, which I advocated for a while ago, which Gallant used for only a game or two. But I think then Hedl got hurt, right? Phil got hurt.
Yeah,
and that
but he did put it back. He did put them back together when Hedl came back, but it was only for like 2-3 games.
Yeah, right. So the big picture view is not come into focus yet for the Rangers.
Yeah,
and that's because they cannot find these combinations that have worked. I mean, you'd love to. I mean, the Rangers would love to snap their fingers and have Kreider and Zibanejad go back to the way they were last year, right? They'd love to snap their fingers and have Trocheck be the substitute for Strome, but he's not going to be that. He's not a deferential player, Vincent Trocheck, and I watch him, and my question to myself has been: does Trocheck, as the center, have a responsibility to try and accommodate his game to Panarin? And I'm not sure that that's fair to ask. I would like to say yes, and I kind of did in my own head, and maybe even it seeped into some things I've written, earlier in the year. But I'm not sure. Here's Vincent Trocheck coming to a new team, trying to learn a new system. Gallant even talked about that last week, how different the system is in the defensive zone. So he's making all these adjustments. He's a veteran guy coming into a team that, even though they lost Kopp and Vetrano and Strome, it's a team that's played together, pretty much all last year. And number of guys, the year before that, a couple of years before that. So he's trying to fit in anyway. And now maybe to ask him to, change his game to accommodate Artemi Panarin, that might be unfair. And that Panarin is going to be unable to, he's not changing his game to accommodate Trocheck. So I'm not sure that this is going to work. I don't. I don't have great confidence that that's going to work. And again, I would like to see Philip Hedl play with Artemi Panarin. But the big picture hasn't come into focus yet. You can talk about combinations all you want. Mika Zibanejad has not played well 5-on-5. And at some point it's on him. It's not whether he's playing with Lafreniere on the left, or he's playing with Panarin on the left, or he's playing with Kreider on the left. He's the guy. And he hasn't played well at 5-on-5. It's his responsibility to pick it up. It's Panarin's responsibility to pick it up and, be a little bit more effective, regardless of whether he's playing with Vincent Trocheck or Philip Hedl or Mika Zibanejad. So there's a lot to be resolved. I mean, we're not quite halfway through the season. I remember back in 14-15, which was Vigneault's first year. The Rangers struggled through the Christmas break, and even maybe a game, a week or so after that. And Vigneault was constantly changing his lines, and that was the year where, no, I'm sorry, it was 13-14. It was his first year, 13-14. And they had a number of left wings who could play center, a number of centers who could play left wing. Brian Boyle, Brad Richards for a bit was even on left wing. It took him a long time to sort it out, but it was his first year. This is Gallant's second year, and it's taking him a long time to sort it out. But the Rangers got it going. They needed a deadline trade. They needed Marty St. Louis to cement their playoff spot. But they turned it around a little bit the second half. I think it's going to be difficult for them to play consistent hockey without having consistent combinations. But which comes first? Right. They have to play well in order to stay together. And it's kind of like 3-4 games. If they had played well last night, I don't think there'd be any changes today.
No, definitely not.
They just played so.
Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, it was as bad as it's been all year.
It was
They
bad.
were uninspired. They were lethargic. They were careless. They were sloppy. And honestly,
Yeah.
they didn't show up, and it was kind of a really a setback for them,
Mhm.
which they're going to need to overcome very quickly because um, they have a tough game coming up in Tampa Thursday. They have a tough game coming up against the Panthers. I mean, which becomes a huge game because Florida is, falling out of the race. This becomes a gigantic game for the Panthers in their playoff hope. The team that won the President's Trophy last year is now what, in eighth, ninth,
Mhm.
10th place in the East, and they're falling out of contact. So the Rangers have to get this straightened out quickly. They've got Carolina coming in next Tuesday. They've got a lot of big games coming up. They're all big games now, and now you can see with the Islanders having won, having won on Tuesday, how important the Rangers' victory over the Islanders was last week because there's a point to separating them. The Rangers need just to buckle down and play a much harder game, and that's what's Gallant used the word soft last night, and
Mhm.
they just didn't engage. They were not engaged against Washington. Very, very disappointing. And you know what? Maybe he will take another look at it. And 95%, I would say 90 to 95% of the time, the lines you see in practice are the lines he's going with the next game.
Yeah.
But maybe he will take another look at it and say, you know what? Let's throw this one out. Let's go
Right.
back to what's worked the last couple of weeks when we won 8 out of 9 and played extremely well in the one loss in Pittsburgh. Maybe he'll go back to that. I don't know. I guess we'll find out, as he likes to say, game time.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was actually just going to say, because he did keep kind of saying today, like, oh, these line changes could change by the time I get down the hallway, literally at the train.
Well, he likes to say that. It's like
Yeah.
the coach, because it gives him breathing room. It
Right.
allows him to make a change and say, well, I never said
Yeah.
we were going to do this,
Mhm.
but it's kind of it's kind of a phrase like coaches sometimes use when they're asked at the morning skate about the lineup, and the coach says, "I haven't decided yet."
Please.
Just say,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm not going to tell you."
Yeah.
And
It's
Gallant doesn't
better.
do. He's not one of those. I haven't
Yeah.
decided yet.
Hmm.
But that's always laughable because the players always know. They're told in the morning or sometimes the night before. The lines are set out in the morning, and then the coach comes out and says, "I haven't decided yet. I'll make a game time decision." No. But
Well,
we'll see.
the
Honestly,
others,
he does, but again, almost all the time, the
right.
lines at practice one day are the lines that start the game the next night.
And if that's the case, then Alexis Lafreniere is either going to be scratched or playing on the fourth line. So obviously you saw that he was skating on the left
Mhm.
wing, kind of splitting the time with Sammy Blais, with Brodzinski and VC, which was also interesting. VC getting bumped to the fourth line because he's been so good for them this season. But I don't know.
He was kind of bumped last night in the third period.
Yeah,
He didn't play a lot in the third last night when they rearranged the lines last night.
right. Just your general immediate reaction to seeing Lafreniere skating on the fourth line today. Yeah. Can we just clip the sigh? I think we should just clip
No,
the
he hasn't played well for a while. He seems to be regressing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of rationalizations that are used to explain what has been a pretty dramatic disconnect between the forecast and projections for Lafreniere coming out as the first overall and what we've seen for 3 years from him. I think he's taken a step back from last year. I think he's taken a step back from last year's playoffs. I'm not sure why. And what I was going to say is there have been a lot of rationalizations. He doesn't get on the first power play. He's playing on the third line. He doesn't
Mhm.
get enough minutes. Well, his 5-on-5 minutes his 5-on-5 minutes equate to just about any winger in the league. Honestly, I mean, he gets more 5-on-5 time than Kreider. He has all year. He doesn't quite get as more than Panarin, but it's not the 5-on-5 time is not a great disparity. So yes, he's not on the first power play, but you know what? Neither is Philip Hedl, and Philip Hedl makes an impression.
Yep.
Neither is Kakko, and Kakko has made an impression this year. Lafreniere has not made an impression. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I wish I had greater insight into this. I know it seems to me like he's only an average skater. That certainly doesn't do him any good in a league that gets faster and faster and faster. But his instincts seem to be a bit off. He's always, I even thought his rookie season where, he didn't get as much ice time and it was a difficult time because it was the 56 game season. He hadn't played competitively in almost 10 months. There was no exhibition season. There was no real training camp. So it was a difficult adjustment. But we're 3 years later or 2 years later, I mean, shouldn't he have been able to get beyond that at this point? I just don't know. I mean, he plays well in spurts. I mean, there are games like, immediately when he went up and played with Zibanejad, 3-4 weeks ago. He made an impact those first couple of games. He was fine. He was around the net. He played with jam, but that fell off very quickly. And I just wonder, and it's a question. It's a question. It's not a rhetorical question. Is he in the greatest shape? Is he in the greatest condition? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure the Rangers are spending a lot of time doing self-examination, or if they're not, they should. There should be a lot of conversation, I think, between the coaching staff and Lafreniere about what's going on, what he sees, how he feels. This is a major investment. He's the first overall pick. You can't miss on that.
Yeah.
You just can't. And it's very, very difficult to recover from that if this is what it is. Look, I'm certainly not ready to put him on the trade market. I'm not ready to banish him. I'm not ready to label him a disappointment
or a bust. That's the word that gets thrown around.
Right. I mean, he's 3 years into the league. It can take a little bit more time for some players than others, but it's been a very, very disappointing year, I think, for him. A very disappointing first 36 games, where again, you want to say, well, he doesn't get power play time and Stützle does, and he doesn't get power play time and this guy does, but neither does Hedl and neither does Kakko, and they have made much more of an impression than Lafreniere. So it's time for him to earn time. Even a few weeks ago, and we talked about it, or actually it might have been the week that you were not on, where I had made that tweet about when him taking another offensive zone, and instead of being benched, Gallant rewarded him, and what is this? But it was the right coaching move. I mean, he had the pulse of the team at the time. The coach did, and he understood that maybe at that point Lafreniere needed a lift, and so he put him up on the first line, and he was good. But it always, his play always seems to waver, and I just don't know why, and that's why I bring up conditioning. I don't know. Look, he may be in the greatest shape. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just asking questions.
Well, might I say that is truly a Hall of Fame analysis right there, and I'm sure that that's exactly what the fans needed today, Larry. So thank you for that. I wanted to go back to the fact that this is also not the first time that Gerard Gallant has made this sort of move with Lafreniere. He had him on the fourth line for a practice and a game last season. He was a healthy scratch April 13th last season.
It was in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I do remember.
It was a game in Philly,
yeah.
and he said that he thought he needed a rest. I remember,
that was his wording.
And that was his wording.
Yeah.
But at that point, his game had been steadily diminishing.
It was clear. Yeah, it was clear it was a healthy scratch.
And he responded. Lafreniere did. Right? I mean, wasn't it the next game? And I could be off. It wasn't the next game, the Detroit Saturday afternoon game, where he scored the goal, or it came pretty soon after.
I'm looking. Because I think you're right. April. He scored twice.
Right. He scored
in the following game against Detroit.
Right. And that was the one where he scored the spectacular goal off the move.
Yes.
And that was the game after he had been a healthy scratch.
Yes.
And and he responded, and he played well the rest of the year, and he played well in the playoffs.
Right. Okay, so that's my next question. You think that this is just Gallant, trying to press the right buttons again? And, because obviously some people can look at it as a too much of an old school approach, if anything, give him more power play time, like instead go the opposite route and just kind of throw your hands up and say, well, let the kid play. Do you think that's my question? What do you think about that?
No, I wouldn't put him on the first power play.
Yeah.
He hasn't. I just don't think he's earned it.
Mm-hmm.
And no, honestly, I don't think you put a struggling player onto a struggling first unit and expect any improvement or any response. And I don't think this is a punishment. I don't think Gallant is a punish coach.
Yeah.
I'm sure like no coaches would like to be characterized that way.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some.
Yeah. Cough, cough.
There are some. I don't think he's a guy who wants to punish. I think he's a guy who's looking to motivate him. Who's just trying to find the key to unlock his whatever the best he has. Yeah. We certainly haven't seen it this year. We saw spurts of it last year. Yeah. Honestly,
and the playoffs.
Right, and in the playoffs. But last year, he had the 19 even strength goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of 5-on-5 goals. Mm-hmm. Honestly, he was second on the team, and so you could look at that and say, you know what, he's coming. It's maybe he's not coming as quickly as we want, but he's coming. He's coming. He hasn't gained any traction this year, and the Rangers need him. They need him now. And they need him in long term because he is one of their cornerstones, or they expect him to be one of their cornerstones. If he is an average player, then it changes the dynamic. So and again, we're 2.5 years into his career. Right. He's 2.5 years into his career. The first year was not optimum. So. Try and understand, try and take it all in perspective. But the Rangers need the Rangers and Lafreniere need to find a way for him to reach his upside. And so far it's been very, very fleeting. Certainly this season it's been disappointing. He's not the only one, but
right.
There's a lot of focus on him, and listen, every player on the team so far has had his ups and downs, except maybe for Adam Fox, who's generally played well all year, other than a game or two here and there. I think Ryan Lindgren has been, very consistent. Barclay Goodrow has probably been their most effective forward. Yeah. Honestly, and when you take a look at what he's done, Gallant is right. Every line he plays with, gets better.
That's great.
But that's only a handful of players. Right. When you look at, I think Philip Hedl has played well. If he could, if he can stay healthy and get a run of 20, 25 games, I think that would be, beneficial for everybody. But there just aren't that many players who have played to their potential, which is why they're on a playoff bubble. And even after winning now 8 out of 10, they're on the playoff bubble, and a bad week is very, very damaging. So that's, again, they need to get this straightened out. Not because anyone's going to push panic buttons, but because of the reality of the fact that the Rangers appear to be one of 5, 6 teams battling for 2 or 3 spots,
Mhm.
and they're all fairly substantial teams. We're talking about the Islanders, talking about Washington, talking about Florida. So these aren't teams that are simply going to go away unless the Panthers spin out of control.
Sticking with the big picture theme, do you feel like this has all been a bit of a perfect storm in the sense that a combination of all the lineup changes are not really helping Lafreniere's situation, not really helping some of the player situations with getting chemistry, that there needs to be some continuity there, at least a little bit? Do you feel like it could just all be meshing together a bit?
Again, which comes first?
Right.
The fact that there's no stability, or the fact that there's not enough stability to allow
Mm-hmm.
for consistent line. Again, just with Lafreniere, he moves up with Zibanejad, everybody gets excited, and then that kind of falls off. He's playing the right side at first, then he's playing the left side. There's this mystery about whether he can actually play right wing or not. I don't think they need him to play right wing right now, because I think Kako is playing well, Goodrow is playing well. So I don't think they need him. They need him to fit into that right wing slot. But there's always a mystery about it. Well, is he really comfortable there? Well, he says
Right.
yes, but it doesn't really look like
Yeah,
it is.
it definitely
Or
doesn't look
Gallant
like it.
moves him out of there after 6, 8, 10 games, whatever it is, and then he's back to playing the third line, and the third line, not as a pejorative, but the kid line, where everybody thinks that that's where he thrives the most, and they play well for a few games, and then that kind of trails off. So yes, would it be better if he could find a combination? Would it be better if the Rangers had their 9? Of course. Is Gallant moving a little bit too quickly at times? Maybe. And again, I would like to see him not make changes off
Yeah.
the Washington game.
Mhm.
Look, if there's a lineup change because they want to get Sammy Blais back in, then there's a lineup change, and I think that's justifiable if they want to do that. Honestly, they are among their deficiencies against the Caps was their absolute lack of physicality,
Mhm.
and there was none. Yeah, there was none. It's not a very physical league anymore. There aren't that many physical teams, but there's a difference between not being physical and playing the way the Rangers did last night, where
Yeah.
you're poking and reaching and being shoved off the puck, and there was very, very little fight back. Well, there was nothing, and so I could understand if the Rangers want to get Blais back into the lineup tomorrow night, which would mean a scratch, and of course that would impact the line combinations. But if there's not a lineup change, then I would be just as happy with sticking with this and just saying, okay, this was a bad one. It was, no one wants to use the excuse, and it is not a legitimate excuse, but they did have 4 days off the ice. Now, the other team had 3. So, and again, it's far be it from me to make excuses for the Rangers. But it was an odd, bit of scheduling. This only happens, this doesn't happen often, where this happens only once, when you're off the ice for for this long a period of time, around Christmas. So I would as bad as it was, I would give them a mulligan on this one, and I would be very attentive to the first period in Tampa. That's what I would do, but um, haven't gotten any texts from the coach asking for my we'll have to see.
Well, Larry, enjoy your time in Tampa and sunrise, 75 and sunny. Hopefully we see you next week with a nice little tan.
That's the goal. That's the objective.
Listen, I want to see a picture of you laying on the beach, relaxing with a martini. That's the hope.
Yeah.
Larry. Have a happy New Year. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Same to you guys.